The neon sign outside the Ironwood Roadhouse buzzed faintly against the night. Inside, a jukebox hummed with old country songs, beer mugs clinked, and tired truckers leaned on the bar. For most, it was just another quiet evening in the dusty town of Fair Creek. But for Daniel Cross, a former Marine and now single dad, every night was a test. He ran the Roadhouse with calloused hands and a heart that never seemed to rest. He had 2 kids to raise, a mountain of bills, and memories from the battlefield that clawed at him when the nights grew still. Daniel wasn't the kind of man who sought trouble. He had seen enough of it in Iraq and Afghanistan. What he wanted now was peace, a safe place for his children, Emily and Jacob, and maybe a future that didn't feel so heavy. But trouble has a way of finding men like him. That night, as Daniel wiped down the bar, the doors swung open, and in walked 2 men dressed in worn leather jackets bearing the unmistakable patch, Hell's Angels. The Roadhouse quieted. Even the jukebox seemed to hesitate. The brothers, Ray and Luke Dalton, twins with long hair, scarred knuckles, and the hard look of men who had lived 1,000 miles of rough roads, took a table near the corner. People whispered, eyes narrowed. To most, Hell's Angels were the kind of storm you didn't want to be near. Daniel studied them calmly. He didn't judge men by their jackets. He had fought beside rougher souls in deserts far from home, and he knew this: every man carried a story, some heavier than others. As he brought them 2 beers, he noticed something. Luke's hand trembled slightly as he reached for his drink, his knuckles bruised and swollen. Ray's eyes kept darting to the door like he was expecting something bad. It didn't take long for it to arrive. The roar of engines outside grew louder, and within moments, the doors slammed open again. Half a dozen men swaggered in, local bikers from a rival crew, the Iron Vultures. Their leader, a broad man with a cruel grin named Carter Briggs, spotted the twins immediately. Well, if it ain't the Dalton boys, Carter sneered. Hell's Angels think they can ride through our town without paying their dues. The bar stiffened. Folks looked at Daniel, the single dad Marine behind the counter. Everyone knew he didn't tolerate fights in his Roadhouse. But this was different. These weren't drunk farmhands swinging fists. These were men with steel in their eyes and knives on their belts. Ray stood slowly, his jaw tight. We ain't here for you, Carter. Just passing through. Passing through. Carter laughed, his men circling like wolves. You don't pass through Fair Creek without my say-so. Daniel felt something stir deep inside him, the same instinct he had felt in combat when he saw weaker men about to be crushed. He looked at the Dalton twins. He didn't know them, but he saw in their eyes the same thing he once carried: exhaustion but not weakness. He stepped out from behind the bar. This is my Roadhouse, Daniel said evenly, his voice calm but carrying the steel of command. And in my Roadhouse, nobody lays a hand on anyone. Carter turned, laughing. And who the hell are you supposed to be? Some bartender with a rag? Daniel's eyes didn't flinch. I'm Daniel Cross, former Marine. I buried good men so punks like you could run your mouths back home. You'll not start your war here. The room went silent. The Iron Vultures shifted uneasily. Carter sneered, but there was hesitation in his eyes. Ray and Luke looked at Daniel with quiet surprise. Strangers had turned their backs on them before. Rarely did anyone stand with them. But Carter wasn't the type to back down easily. He shoved a chair aside and moved toward Ray. His hand went for a chain at his belt. Before anyone could breathe, Daniel moved. Years of Marine training lit up in his muscles. His hand clamped Carter's wrist, twisting it until the chain clattered to the floor. With one swift motion, he shoved the man back against a table, pinning him. The room erupted. Carter's men rushed forward, but Ray and Luke were on their feet in a heartbeat, fighting shoulder to shoulder with Daniel. Fists flew, tables toppled, and the jukebox finally gave up with a dying groan. Daniel's knuckles split, his ribs ached, but he moved like a storm, protecting the men beside him. He wasn't fighting for the Dalton twins, he was fighting for principle, for a Roadhouse that was supposed to be safe, for the kind of world he wanted his kids to grow up in. When the dust settled, Carter and his men limped out into the night, cursing and swearing revenge. The Dalton twins stood battered but alive. Daniel wiped the blood from his lip, breathing hard. You didn't have to do that, Luke said quietly. Daniel shook his head. Yeah, I did. No one gets jumped in my house. Ray stared at him for a long moment, then reached out his hand. Name's Ray. This here's Luke. You ever need a favor, you call us. Daniel nodded, not knowing how much those words would mean. The next morning, Daniel's Roadhouse parking lot was transformed. Engines thundered down the highway, one after another, until the whole road trembled. Daniel stepped outside, shielding his eyes from the sun, and froze. A sea of motorcycles filled the lot, rows upon rows of chrome and leather. But these weren't the iron vultures, and they weren't men. They were women. 200 lady bikers, from chapters across the state, had answered a call. At their head was a tall, fierce woman with streaks of silver in her braid, Maria, Ironheart, James, president of the Lady Valkyries MC. Ray and Luke were there too, standing near the front. Maria swung off her bike, her boots crunching the gravel. She looked Daniel in the eye. "You stood for our brothers last night. Word spreads fast. Now we stand for you." Daniel blinked, his throat tight. He had fought alongside Marines, but this was different. This was a family he hadn't asked for but desperately needed. Emily and Jacob peeked out from the Roadhouse door, wide-eyed at the sight of 200 powerful women filling the lot like an army. Daniel swallowed hard. I don't know what to say." Maria smiled. "Say nothing. Just know, you're not alone anymore." For the first time in years, Daniel felt the weight on his shoulders lift. That night, the Roadhouse was alive again, not with fear, but with laughter, music, and the rumble of engines. The lady bikers filled the air with stories, cheers, and the kind of fierce loyalty that only comes from living hard and standing tall. Daniel stood behind the bar, Emily and Jacob safe upstairs, and watched the world shift around him. He wasn't just a single dad Marine anymore. He was part of something larger, a brotherhood, a sisterhood, a family forged not by blood, but by respect. And in that moment, he knew, no matter what storms came next, he and his children would never face them alone. The roar of 200 engines still echoed in Daniel's chest as he stood outside the Ironwood Roadhouse, staring at the sight before him. Leather vests, chrome glinting in the sun, braided hair whipping in the wind, the Lady Valkyries MC had arrived in force. For a moment, he felt like he was back in combat, watching reinforcements roll in when all hope seemed lost. Except this wasn't the battlefield, and this wasn't the U.S. Marines. This was something far stranger. 200 women bikers, rallying for him, a single dad who had simply refused to let bullies rule his house. His daughter Emily tugged at his sleeve. "Daddy, are they here to fight you?" Daniel knelt, brushing her blonde hair back. "No, sweetheart, they're here to stand with us." His son Jacob squinted at the riders, awe written all over his 10-year-old face. "They look like an army." Daniel smiled faintly. "That's because they are. Maria, Ironheart, James, the president of the Lady Valkyries, dismounted her bike with the kind of authority Daniel recognized instantly. She wasn't just a leader by patch, she was a leader by soul. Her steel-gray eyes swept the lot before landing on him. "Daniel Cross," she said, her voice carrying like a commander's call. "You defended our brothers last night. The Dalton twins are family to us. And in this world, you protect family, or you answer to all of us." Luke and Ray Dalton stepped forward, both still bruised from the fight but standing taller than the night before. Luke's voice was low but steady. "He didn't owe us a thing. But he stood anyway." Maria nodded once, then looked at Daniel. "You have no idea the message you sent. A Marine, standing shoulder to shoulder with outlaws most folks won't even look at. That doesn't go unnoticed." Daniel swallowed hard. He wasn't a man who liked attention. He just did what was right. "I didn't fight for colors," he said quietly. "I fought because no one deserves to get jumped on my floor. Not in front of my kids. Not in my house." For a moment, silence stretched across the lot. Then Maria broke into a smile that could cut through thunder. "Then this house is ours too." The cheer that erupted from 200 throats rattled the windows of the Roadhouse. Emily clapped her hands over her ears, giggling despite herself, and Jacob whooped like he was watching a 4th of July parade. That night, the Ironwood Roadhouse looked like it hadn't in years. The lot was packed with bikes. Inside, music blared, laughter shook the rafters, and for once the air was free of fear. Daniel moved behind the bar, pouring drinks faster than he had since his younger years, while Emily and Jacob sat safely in the upstairs office, peeking down the stairs now and then to watch the wild, colorful scene. "Not bad for a Wednesday night," Ray joked, sliding onto a bar stool with Luke beside him. "Not bad," Daniel said, half smiling. "I've got more boots in this place than I've ever seen. I don't know whether to thank you or charge admission." Ray lifted his beer. "Charge Carter Briggs instead. He brought this on himself." At the mention of Carter's name, Daniel's smile faded. He knew it wasn't over. Men like Carter didn't just lick their wounds and move on. They came back, meaner, uglier, and more dangerous. As if reading his mind, Maria leaned across the bar. We know Briggs. We've had run-ins before. He's a bully who only wins when others are afraid. But with you, Daniel, you're not afraid. That scares him. Daniel set down a glass, his jaw tightening. Fear is something I buried overseas. But my kids, they're the reason I won't let it creep back in. Briggs can come for me all he wants. But he won't touch them. Maria studied him for a long moment, then placed a hand on his shoulder. You're one of us now, whether you like it or not. Sure enough, 2 nights later, Briggs returned. The iron vultures rode in after sundown, their engines growling like thunderclouds. Daniel heard them before he saw them, and his heart sank. Emily and Jacob were upstairs, safe, but he knew danger was circling. The roadhouse quieted as the doors burst open. Carter Briggs swaggered in, his lips still split from where Daniel had slammed him into a table. His men fanned out behind him, sneers painted across their faces. Well, Cross, Carter drawled, you've made quite the name for yourself. Standing with angels, letting lady bikers turn your bar into their clubhouse. Tell me, when did you stop being a man and start being a babysitter? Daniel leaned on the bar, his face unreadable. When I realized real men don't need to tear others down to stand tall. Carter snarled, slamming his fist against a table. You think 200 women scare me? They rode back to their little towns. It's just you now, Marine. A chair scraped loudly. Carter froze as Maria Ironheart stood from the corner booth, flanked by 50 Lady Valkyries who had stayed behind. Her voice was a low growl. Who said we left? In an instant, more boots pounded the porch outside. The sound of motorcycles revving split the night. Carter turned, his sneer faltering as he realized the truth. Hundreds of lady bikers were waiting outside. The Dalton twins rose too, their eyes hard as steel. Daniel stepped out from behind the bar, slowly rolling up his sleeves. His voice carried the same authority that once commanded Marines in combat. Carter, this ends tonight. You walk away now, you save your men's bones. You keep pushing, and this roadhouse becomes your grave. The silence that followed was suffocating. Carter looked around, his bravado cracking as he saw the wall of eyes, fists, and loyalty closing in. For a long moment, he teetered between pride and survival. Finally, he spat on the floor. This ain't over, Cross. Daniel stepped closer, his eyes like fire. Yes, Carter, it is. The iron vultures left Fair Creek that night, their engines fading into the distance, their leader broken not by fists but by something far heavier, respect denied. The lady bikers stayed long enough to rebuild what the fight had damaged. They patched chairs, restocked shelves, even taught Emily how to braid leather cords and Jacob how to polish chrome. The roadhouse wasn't just safe again, it was alive. For Daniel, something shifted deep inside. He had always carried the burden of raising his kids alone, of surviving one battle only to fight another in civilian life. But now, standing in the glow of the roadhouse lights, surrounded by allies he never expected, he realized the truth. Family isn't just who shares your blood. It's who stands beside you when the world tries to knock you down. That night, as Emily and Jacob fell asleep to the distant sound of motorcycles rumbling like lullabies, Daniel whispered a promise to himself, I'll never stand alone again.